Saying hello from West Virginia. Somewhere. All right, joke of the day, and I know you're ready. I know you're waiting. Let's get to it. So what do you call dudes who love math? You know, dudes who love math? Algebros. I want to be called an algebro. I think that's pretty cool. Okay. Well, the other cool thing is being able to divide signed numbers. We know how to add signed numbers. We know how to subtract signed numbers. We know how to multiply signed numbers. Remember, when you're multiplying signed numbers, you're going to multiply the digits to get the digit of your answer. And then in order to determine the sign, if you have an odd number of signs, remember that negative is an odd feeling. So if you have an odd number of negatives, then your answer is going to be negative. If you have an even number of negatives, your answer is going to be positive. It's as simple as that. Multiply the digits and figure out what that sign is. So we're going to take a look at dividing signed numbers. And you know what? It's going to be very similar to the idea of multiplying those signed numbers. In other words, remember when we were multiplying signed numbers, we said, let's go ahead and let's multiply the numbers. Well, dividing signed numbers, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to divide those numbers. In other words, divide the digits. And then to figure, and bear in mind too, you notice we've got a couple of fractions here. If those are fractions, remember when you divide fractions, you're going to copy, change, flip. You're going to multiply by the reciprocal of the second one. But after you've divided the digits or dealt with the fractions, you need to determine the sign. Well, this goes back to exactly what we had said about multiplying. We said if we had an odd number of negatives, the answer was going to be negative because that odd creates an odd feeling, a negative feeling. And so the same thing is going to happen here. Exactly the same. An odd number of negatives is going to result in the answer being a negative. But an even number of negatives will result in my answer being a positive. See, it's the same rules. The only difference is now we're dividing the digits instead of multiplying the digits. Otherwise, it's the same. So let's take a run with it. Here, remember the bar means division. So I'm going to take a 56 and divide it by -8. The question is, do I divide the 8 into the 56 or do I divide the 56 into the 8? Which way does this go? Yes, we always divide up. So in other words, 8 goes into 56 how many times? Yes, 8 goes into 56 7 times. Now we need to determine the sign. We have one negative. That is an odd number of negatives. And remember, this negative is a negative feeling. So odd's going to mean that my answer is going to be negative. So I divided those digits. 56 divided by 8 is 7. And I have an odd number of negatives making my answer negative. Well, let's take a look at the next one. A -3/4 divided by a 7/8. Well, remember, when I'm dealing with fractions, I'm going to go back to that idea of copy, change, flip. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of the second. So I'm going to copy down the first, -3/4, change it to multiplication, flip that second one, and now I'm going back to a multiplication problem. Remember, you are still in my math gang. We have fun in that math gang because we're going to cancel on those diagonals. We're going to cancel up and down, and then we're going to shoot straight across. We're going to multiply across the numerator, multiply across the denominator. So we are algebros, and we're going to cancel these diagonals, but notice nothing cancels here. But how about here? 4 goes into 4 once, 4 goes into 8 twice. And remember, cancel up and down. I know it looks goofy, and I know I don't look like a bro now, do I? But we're going to cancel up and down because I guarantee, 100% guarantee, that if you will cancel up and down before you multiply across, your answer will be simplified and you won't even have to think about it. So check here, 3 and 1, nothing cancels. 2 and 7, nothing cancels. So now I'm going to shoot straight across. I'm going to multiply across my numerator, multiply across my denominator. Well, 3 times 2 will give me a 6. And on that denominator, 1 times 7 will give me a 7. How many negatives do I have? One negative right here. That is an odd number of negatives. So once again, they're giving me that negative feeling, meaning my answer is a negative. All right, let's try just a few more, just to make sure we feel very good and solid with this. Notice in the next example, yet again, fractions. So I'm going to copy, change, flip. So I'm going to copy down the first one, change it to multiplication. I'm going to flip that one. Now notice currently it's over a 1, so when I flip it, it becomes under a 1. And now I'm ready to multiply those fractions. I'm going to cancel my diagonals, cancel up and down, and then I'm going to multiply across. So when I check my diagonals, 2 goes into 2 once, 2 goes into 6 3 times. check this diagonal, nothing happens. Check up and down, as goofy as it feels. 1 and 3, nothing happens. 1 and 3, nothing happens. I am ready to shoot straight across and multiply across. So 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3 is 9. Now, let's check out the signs. Remember, an odd number of signs gives me that odd negative feeling. My answer will be negative. But I have 1, 2 negatives. That's an even number of negatives. So will my answer be negative? Nope, my answer will be positive. So my answer then is going to be a positive 1/9. All right, now let's take a look at these. First off, I do have an odd number of negatives here and an odd number of negative here. So that means my answer will be negative. However, let's think about what's happening here. When you do a division problem, let's go back to that first example that we had where we took that 56 and divided it by -8. Well, when we divided the digits simply meant the top number, even though I said I'm going to divide 8 into a 56, really when you have a fraction, and this is just a fraction, my top number, that numerator, tells me how many objects I have to pass out. The bottom number tells me how many people are out there to receive them, or in other words, how many sets I'm going to break these objects out into. So what this one says is I have 56 objects in my hand. It's almost like saying I've got 56 markers in my hand, and I'm going to place them into 8 sets. Well, if I have 56 markers in my hands and I'm going to spread them out into 8 sets, how many markers will be in each set? Well, I will have 7 markers in each set. So again, the numerator tells me how many objects are to be passed out. The denominator tells me how many sets are out there to receive the objects. Or I like to think how many people are out there to receive the objects. So with that in mind, let's look at these last 2 examples. See, this example says I don't have any markers in my hands. My hands are empty, nothing to pass out. But this says that there are 5 people, we'll call them people, 5 people out there to receive the markers. So 5 people out there to receive the markers, but I don't have any markers to pass out. So therefore, how many markers will each person receive? Right, 0. So when I have 0 in a numerator of my fraction, 0 in the numerator, my answer is going to be 0. As opposed to what you see here. 0 in the denominator. Now that's different. Granted, this has a negative in it, but let's think about this. Essentially what it's saying is that I have 5 markers in my hands ready to be passed out. Granted, there's a negative there, but let's just go with this. 5 markers in my hands to be passed out. This says there's nobody out there to receive them. No sets to break these up into. So if I have these markers in my hands and nobody's out there to receive them, I'm trying to pass them out. I'm trying to make the action happen, but I can't make it happen. So therefore, in this case, my action is what we call undefined because I cannot define the action. I cannot make it happen. So when 0 is in the denominator of a fraction, then my answer is going to be undefined. And that is something that people confuse really, really bad, whether this means undefined or 0, and this one as well. 0 in the denominator is undefined because you cannot make the action happen. 0 in a numerator is 0 because that means everybody's getting 0 markers. But the bottom line of this lesson is simply to say that whenever I'm dividing my signed numbers, what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide the digits to get the digit of my answer. I'm going to determine the sign, and like before with those multiplying of your signed numbers, an odd number of negatives gives me kind of that negative feeling. It's an odd negative feeling, so therefore my answer is going to be a negative. Even number of negatives gives me a good feeling, so I'm going to have a positive for my answer. I hope that helps. Have a great day.